everybody. My name is Petya, and I was your adjudicator for elementary level for 11 and 12 and junior level 13 and 14, duets and trios. So, welcome. It was really, really nice to hear all of you, and I've really enjoyed everybody's playing. There's some great ensemble work, um, really lovely things that you're all doing that you should be doing, like looking at each other, following each other, listening to the other person very carefully, and feeling character and speed together very, very well. It was really, really fun to hear you all. So, thank you for that. That was definitely a great experience for me. And I wanted to share some ideas with you today that you may have heard already, or maybe they could be said in maybe just a different way that you may try when you next practice or rehearse together, or there may be ideas just to keep in mind the next time that you play duos as well. So I hope you can get something out of this little workshop. And there's a few themes that we'll go through together, and I'll show you some stuff as well. So stay tuned. So the first thing that I would like to do is just talk briefly about starting together, which may seem like something very obvious, but it is tricky, isn't it? So one of the main things to do is to train yourselves to cue and not to count with numbers. So there's many reasons for this. It is a little bit more natural to the music. It with some practice, it can remove any ambiguity, so it becomes really clear to do. But there's a few things to keep in mind. Um, One of them is, of course, pick a leader who's going to do this, um, and usually that should normally be the person that has the main material at the beginning, of course. So somebody that has the theme in the beginning of the piece. This is mostly important if you are starting at the same time. Of course, even if you are not starting at the same time, be sure to still give a cue, because it's nice to know that it's about to start so that the other person is ready as well. So this it sounds like such a simple thing, doesn't it, queuing, but it can be a little bit confusing. I remember being confused about it was when I was probably about your age, when I first started to play duos, and especially when it was my turn to cue, because I wasn't sure what to do. And I remember trying to just give a nod, um, without much relation to the music, and relation to the tempo that I was about to start, totally confusing the people I was playing with. So that is something to make sure you don't do. Um, so the main thing is make sure the cue is clear, but also be sure that it relates to the speed and the character that you're about to play in. So that if you are playing something quick, your cue will be or and full of energy. Your cue will also be full of energy, and in the tempo that you intend to play in. So be sure that these are things that you practice even before you rehearse with the other person, if you are chosen to be the leader to develop the cue. And be sure that there is zero ambiguity. So feel and show the cue in the same way every time that you rehearse, so that the other person learns what it feels like and learns to follow you. Um, or if you're the follower, that you feel better, so that you can trust that this will start together because you've rehearsed it many times in the same way. So with the counting, that can happen in the beginning stages or something that you choose to do. It removes a little bit of the doubt about exactly when to start, but it can also take away from the character of the piece. So I strongly encourage you guys to try and just feel the same amount of beats that you already are, and then just give like a nod or a gesture on the last beat or the last two beats. That will tell your partner when to come in, or again, if you're the other person, that will give you a clear idea of how the piece, when it's about to start, in a clear way. And that can be good for collaboration, making sure that, say it is a chord, that the first chord is played really well together. And just like with anything, it's just something we practice and get better at. I was terrible at it at first, and it took some time to get better. So if it doesn't go well at first, don't give up and just practice it and try different ways. Because you have to feel secure. The leader that does this has to have a lot of authority, and because it's a pretty responsible job, um, and to be able to make sure you start together. All right, now let's talk about balancing the parts. So, of course, we're coming from most likely from solo players to a duo, and it's very different. And overall, the dynamics that we see in the score are a team effort, so they're cumulative. So, meaning combined from all the parts. For example, um, like if you see two fortes in the score or two pianos dynamically, um, it doesn't mean that you both, or three of you if this is a trio, that you all play the same volume, because if you do, it might not fit. It might work fine, but it may not fit, because if you think about it, the piano is not always very equal because just of the nature of how it is. The upper register can be very thin and harder to play loud, especially depending on the piano that you're playing. And the bass on the other side can be extremely boomy. So that is something you have to keep in mind when you're balancing. Um, Even if it's something here, more in the middle, there's still challenges because it could relate to who has the theme. Maybe somebody has chords that we don't want to hear too much of because we want to hear more of the theme, or somebody has some bass notes that are nice to come out as well. So I'd like to show you maybe one brief thing from one of the pieces that I did recently. So let me just switch my camera here, because then you'll be able to see my hands. And this is just the second movement of the Petite Suite from Debussy. So I played the secondo part, which when I practiced, I practiced pretty loudly. Not like extremely loud, but my piano's dynamics would be closer to like to project in a hall and all that. Maybe kind of overdoing them a little bit in some parts. So when we put the parts together, I had to back out quite a bit to make sure that the primo part was able to play their parts without having to force too much sound, because it was very easy for me to just be quite loud here without much effort, and for the other person to really struggle and to try to outdo that because they have to be heard so much more. Anyway, so one little example is from the beginning here. The secondo part, or my part, it has very simple chords. So I'll just play them without much nuance or anything, just so you can hear. Okay, so that was pretty bland and without trying to do any sort of adjustments or anything. Now you can probably tell that in the first bar I have the same chords, and it's probably not something that I want to hear too much of. Now, to contrast, the other part has kind of this kind of texture. So pretty up here, the right hand of the primo has the main theme, whereas I'm just accompanying here with colors, of course. So at first, I can come from this too. You can hear a lot more of my left hand, and this is all marked piano, by the way, for both parts. So nothing special here, but yeah, just piano. But if we both played it at the same volume, it would sound kind of thick and without much room for the theme to be brought out or anything like that, because these are going to be much louder than this. So naturally, it helps to bring my right hand quite down. And also because the left hand has this quite nice melody that works really well with the upper part. So all that to say, we saw two piano dynamics, but we had to balance it out to combine a little bit more my left hand and a little bit of his right hand in this case, because we had that texture here. Obviously, don't want to hear too much of that because the theme is more important to be heard in the right hand. All right. So all that to say, balance, super important for this kind of work. Now, let's talk also about, of course, knowing the other parts and not just yours. That this is pretty obvious, I would say, but a good reminder. So when you practice on your own, see if you can vividly imagine the other parts and even sing one of them while you play, because it's sometimes there's a quite a nice thing that can happen when you really know the other part, and say that you are playing a part that doesn't quite have the theme, maybe something like this, and when you rehearse together and you can really listen to the other person and not focus only on your part but really give your attention to the other person, you start to react a lot better and a lot differently, and musically it can be really different if you can do that. But that can only happen if you really know the other part. So I strongly encourage you to do that if you are not already, and I'm sure you are. So just really, really know them. Try to sing them when you practice, even if it's in your head. And it helps a lot. It makes it easier to play all of these pieces, for sure. Alright, so let's also talk a little bit about pedaling, because, of course, that is a tough job for the secondo if when you're playing a duo or duet. And yeah, it's a tough job. So you really, really have to know the other part, which relates to what I was just saying. It is a very different feeling pedaling for somebody else, for example. Um, Now, you can have parts of pieces that you're not even playing at a specific spot, but you still have to provide the pedal for the other person, and you have to react to what they're doing. Of course, they can help you with telling you how they would want you to pedal for them and all that, but it's a collaborative effort, of course. So something to not overlook, and something to this is obvious, I'm sure, but something to remind yourself that you are also not just pedaling for yourself, but pedaling for somebody else as well. And I'll show you a very, very brief example here of the same Debussy, but a slightly different movement. Just give me 1 second here. There we go. So the third movement in this piece is just a little minuet, and I played secondo, right? So all I have here is this. Then I hold, 1, 2. Right? So just some extra sharps and grace notes. The other part has a lot more going on. And then, which starts quite nice together. But then they have this whole line of all these notes, right? I'm not going to attempt to play their left hand because I don't want to butcher this. But all these notes, if I wasn't paying attention, I just leave my pedal on, creating quite the blur. Of course, on a keyboard, it sounds not as bad as on an acoustic piano, but it's still quite murky. So you have to see how it would work in different scenarios. Maybe some more changes, or maybe a thinner pedal. So in some of your comments, I wrote thinner pedal. So what I meant by that is just not fully down. So just more on the surface. you might have heard it described as something different, which is why I wanted to make sure you know what it is. Um, and yeah, so that all of that to say, when you pedal, you have to put the other part into account. Otherwise, you can have a really different effect and maybe even something that you didn't mean to do. So it's seriously a challenge for the secondo. So primos, be nice to your secondo partners when you have to do with pedal. Give them a chance to explore. So I'm talking about the secondos, but if you're playing a primo part, it applies as well. Like you have to tell them what you expect because sometimes it might be obvious to you, but not so obvious to the other person. All right. Okay, so I just wanted to wrap up with one thing, just briefly talk about choreography. Um, just to say, practice in the way that you will play together. So if you have a part that the hands are kind of each other's way and one person has to move away from the other or play more like in the key here, make sure you practice that way. It may seem obvious to say that, but a lot of times we're just kind of go on autopilot a little bit. Easy to do that. So just be sure to do that because it can feel a lot easier if you have built this muscle memory in your hands to know exactly what to do. Um, some scores will actually have little instructions like, and I saw some of them. It says get out of the way, etc., or something else, which is nice. Just know that some repertoire doesn't have that, so you have to make decisions about that among yourselves and see how to do it most effectively without too much confusion or uncomfortable like scenarios and all that. So just practice it when you practice on your own so that you're ready for rehearsal. Very small thing. Um, and another also very small thing. This is totally like a personal choice, but if you do have a choice, I strongly recommend two benches. They're often better than using one, and it can get really cramped with one bench. Not just that, but one person may want like a little bit more distance from the piano than the other, and if you have two, that's much easier to do. And, or somebody might want a different height. So if you're all sitting on the same bench and you're like different heights or built differently, it can feel quite awkward. So I just recommend using different ones if you have access to it. Strongly encourage that. Anyway, that is all. I just wanted to share these ideas with you. It was a pleasure to hear you all, and I really hope that you continue to play together, which is, I think, something I wrote on everybody's sheet. So, truly continue playing duos because it can make you a better solo player as well. All right? I've taken enough of your time, so hopefully I'll get to hear you all again at some point, and it was a pleasure for me. Have a great rest of your day or evening. Bye.